Edition of Democratic Dialogue. My name is Mary Lou Crane. I'll be your host this evening, and my guest is Tom Ostrowski of Gloucester. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
We've been asked to talk about democratic values this evening, but before we get into that, let me just ask you a few questions about yourself.
Sure.
How long have you lived in Gloucester?
Actually, about 16 years. I always could remember that because my son is 15, so it was about a year before that, so about 16 years.
And where are you originally from?
Actually from Pennsylvania, northeastern part of Pennsylvania, the Pocono area, a place called Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area in Pennsylvania.
The coal mine area?
Well, that's what it was many, many years ago, and I guess it's still noted for that, but it's not what's there.
So what brought you from the interior of the country to the coast?
Well, I made a wrong turn going to California, actually. No, actually what happened is I'm in the high-tech field. And my college degree is in computers, and information system, that kind of thing. And so naturally, it was either California or Massachusetts, and particularly Boston. So like I said, that wrong turn to California brought me here to the East Coast, and been loving it here. That's great.
Are you involved with anything that involves the water, or it just because Boston is like the East Coast version of Silicon Valley?
That's right. Well, always wanting to go to California because of the ocean and surfing, like I said, made the wrong turn, came here, and really it's the kind of place I like. It's near the water. As far as water, live over in the along the Mill River there, so have a little boat, and particularly with my son, we're out whenever we get a chance. So it's a great place to live.
It's an amazing place for boats. I'm constantly amazed at the numbers of people who have boats.
That's for sure.
So you say that you're involved with high tech.
Yes.
And you work out of Boston or out of your home? Or?
Actually, out of Boston. I commute on the train every day.
Oh, good.
So I do that, and I've been there. This particular company about a little over 7 years now, but I've been in Massachusetts for a little over 20-some years, and primarily in the high-tech industry with different high-tech companies here in the area. And mostly as a training manager, I do a lot of training development, so I've had an opportunity to travel internationally, South America, Europe a bit, Asia even, so and certainly the United States. So I've had an opportunity, fortunately, from working to be able to travel that much.
Oh, that's great. So what got you involved with Democratic politics? I've only been in town 11 years, and I only got to know you a few years ago.
Sure. Well, with working out of town, it's a little difficult to kind of get totally involved, because by the time you leave in the morning, I probably leave about 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. I don't get home until 7 o'clock at night, so it's kind of a long day. But with the things that go on in the country and our community and things, I just felt I wanted to get a bit more involved on the Democratic side of things, because I think I've been what I'll call myself a lifelong Democrat, but haven't gotten as actively as involved as I think I should have, because I think there's so many things that we can provide and do for the country. And so I wanted to get involved.
Did you get involved with a particular candidate, or did you become involved with the Democratic City Committee?
Primarily national candidates. I think at the time when I did come here, I was my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. We got involved with the Clinton campaign.
Oh.
And so and when I say involved, meaning really interested in it and followed it, and certainly became more and more interested as those candidates such as him. And certainly with Deval Patrick, we got a bit involved in some of that campaigning, and certainly with Barack Obama. So looking at the alternatives, this is, it's certainly where we wanted to be in terms of our values and the Democratic side of business.
Now, it's interesting that you mentioned the national candidates, because I've noticed that many people here in Gloucester really are focused that way, and yet we need people for the local candidacies and the local party to be active as well. And it seems to me that I've seen you at some of our local events.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So that translated locally.
It sure does.
Good, good.
John Tierney, those kinds of things. And so, yeah, I'm interested in the local, but, kind of get involved a bit in the national scene, but certainly to involve Patrick Tierney. And,
So what is it, from a philosophical standpoint, that you see as what is meaningful to you and to your wife and your son that makes you want to support these candidates? What kind of democratic values do you espouse, or do the candidates espouse that you identify with?
Okay, sure. No, good question. As I look at my life, and certainly with my wife is a social worker.
Oh.
And the more I've learned from her, because I've kind of been in what I'll call the scientific side, the technical side,
hands-off,
the business side of life,
touchy-feely stuff.
Yeah, exactly. That was the touchy-feely stuff. So the more I saw what she had to go through in terms of working with public and people and issues, I start to realize more and more that I was kind of disconnected from a bit of that, and realizing the kinds of things that go on in life. For example, I feel reasonably well educated. I know there's people who are smarter than me. I know that there's people stronger than me. But when I look at the entire population, some of the people that I see and meet, there's challenge. People have challenges in their lives. I mean, we had challenges ourselves. I was out of work for a year, for instance, and that sort of that nice ability to well, let me say nice ability, but the whole idea of being able to rely a bit on her work and certainly some support that we got from the community, the local community, made me realize that people aren't as fortunate as we are. I was able to recover and go back and get back to work, but I realized that there's a lot of people who don't have those kinds of opportunities, and I started to think more and more about these are the kinds of things that are of concern to me, the human dignity, that people can lose that dignity very quickly if they don't have some sort of protection that I think the Democratic side of the House, if you will, is concerned about. I think people who I meet who tend to be Democrats have more interest in people, what's happening to them, the human dignity that they have, the concern for the person, the civility, the social environment that people live in, and it's really important. I mean, like I said, I saw with my wife, I go to Boston every day and I pass by people on the street. And when I do that, I look at them and I say, they don't have a chance. They may never have had a chance. Some of the people you could see, I don't think anybody wants to be out in 16-degree weather when I walk by them. And I feel very, disheartened when I see that happening, and all the things that we can do as a society to help prevent those kinds of things.
The fact that you actually look at homeless people puts you in a different category, because studies have shown that most people just rush right on by people sitting on the curbs.
Right.
They don't want to see them, and therefore they don't see them, and sometimes that makes those kinds of problems all the more difficult to solve. But it could be your wife rubbing off on you a little with her social work experience, but looking at them is the beginning of recognizing that there in fact is a problem.
Yeah.
But to play devil's advocate for a minute, the other side of the aisle would say that that's all we're about, is throwing money at problems. And certainly you mentioned my particular issue, which is housing, homeless, et cetera.
Yes.
That's one of the most difficult problems of all to solve, because, again, the other side of the aisle would say, let the private sector solve it.
Right.
Why do you think government should be involved with that?
Well, I think that, well, from what I've seen and people who I know who are on the other side of the aisle, so to speak, I'm trying to get them to recognize the challenges that people have, and sometimes there's sort of a philosophy of let the survival of the fittest.
Yes, there is.
And when I talk to people who are friends of mine who may be on other political persuasion, so to speak, they tend to have that attitude. They may not bring it out directly, but I often think how dispassionate they are about other people. And I've learned, like I said, over time, it wasn't like I was perfect. It came out of the box. I would look at some people and say, "Oh, that's their problem. Why they do it?
Right.
Why is it? Why they can't get a job or whatever." And then until it happens to you, or a medical problem or whatever issue, and the government whether it's with Franklin Roosevelt with the New Deal and all that, trying to create that safety net, if you will. And I really do believe in that. I see there is a safety net. Government plays a role. If you leave it up to the private sector, I mean, I go back to some of the readings I used to do when I was in college, Upton Sinclair's The Jungle, talking about how businesses were doing pretty bad things to people. And so government plays a role in helping to regulate some of that. I mean, I'm not saying government should take over, shouldn't take over anything in a sense, but by the same token, it's very important that government provides some sort of baseline or help people out. I just believe that they should.
Well, that's another argument or disagreement we have with our political opponents, and that is that government injects itself too much into our everyday lives. The government should be more hands-off. But we Democrats believe that there really is a role for government in many areas. You mentioned housing. Education is another area where there's a wide divide. I mean, we believe that the government should be involved in education. They believe that it should not. I mean, these are global issues, global, not so much international, but the big issues. And the approach that they might take is that the states should all decide for themselves. So among the 50 states, we could have 50 different policies.
That's right.
Do you disagree with that?
As far as each state is concerned, I mean, certainly states have states' rights, and it's in the Constitution and all that, but I think at a certain level, there are things that we as a society should provide and help our fellow man. And the government, we are the government, basically.
Exactly. I agree with that.
It is. We're the government. We have a right to help others. And that's what I feel is, the human dignity of people, that we should be out there helping. I mean, I could mention some situations where someone may say, well, I'm such and such, but then when I look at what they call their values, and then when they practice their values, it's like two different things. They really don't practice what they preach. Well,
and it's interesting that you say that. I was reading an article in the Times today in discussing the State of the Union address that President gave, and the rebuttal to that from, was it Congressman Ryan or Senator Ryan, said that getting down the deficit is the most important thing. And yet when the man on the street, the woman on the street is questioned, that doesn't even come up. They don't even think about the deficit. Right. Everybody has specific issues that they really want to see taken care of. Sure. And in many cases, it does require funding. I mean, there's a real disconnect with what people want government to do and what these people in Washington sometimes think people want them to do. Right. So,
Well, I think of that in terms of even potholes on our streets.
Right.
Right.
Tip O'Neill saying all things are local.
That's right. Exactly. So we have to contribute as a society, as people, to helping our own communities, and part of that is as easy as filling a pothole. I mean, who's going to fill that pothole? We have to pay for that. That's where government needs to get involved. You can't expect just me to go out in the street and figure out, well, how am I going to fill this pothole? What am I going to put dirt in it? Or whatever. I mean, it's a society. As a society, we need to work together, and I think it's very important that we do work together. And government has a place. It's not, and like I said, we are the government. We have a place to be and help our fellow man.
Well, to continue your pothole conversation, my taxes shouldn't go just to fill the potholes on my street. I live on the opposite side of Gloucester from you. They should also help you fill the potholes on your street. But I've heard people say, I don't have children in the school system, so I don't want my tax dollars going to the Gloucester education budget.
Right.
Which again gets back to your point, I would posit, that we have to take care of each other. Right. That is a very definite democratic value, I believe, that we do believe in helping each other and bringing each other along.
Yes, absolutely.
I've had friends say that the Democrats left them behind because of the taxation policies, but I would again say that I think that we do owe it to each other, brotherhood, sisterhood, etc.
Yeah. Not that I've read the book, but I've read excerpts of it. But even Hillary Clinton, when she wrote "It Takes a Village,"
that's right.
I thought about that, and even though I think it sort of espouses about it made about children. How it takes a village to raise a child. It really takes a village to raise out us as a society and bring us up even better. So it's all of us getting involved, whether it's involved with children or our society or our city. It takes all of us. It's like the phrase, no man is an island. We can't just expect us to be ourselves, just be ourselves and not work with others, be with others. We're a social society. And so we need to help each other. Like I said, from a human dignity standpoint, if someone falls on the street, you're going to let it. I've seen people pass those people by.
You have?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of disturbing when you see that. So
yes,
it's really helping. They're humans just like we are. Everybody is a human being, and we just need to help each other.
That gets back to your word dignity. I mean, you have to see the dignity in other people in order to want to care for them and to help them. And
right.
Your wife, as a social worker, sees this every single day in her life.
Every day, that's for sure.
I actually work with seniors, and it's a very, very difficult area sometimes because it's sometimes easier for people, again, to look the other way. Just like with the homeless, they don't really want to see what the needs of elders are. But as the baby boomers are reaching the 60s this year, we see an incredible jump in the need for services.
Right.
And I don't think we should be pitting the generations against each other either, the needs of seniors versus the needs of the young in school. But without government, who would be divvying up this pie that we're collecting taxes?
That's right. Yeah. It's the kind of thing where, some of the other thoughts we have in terms of like free market society, free market, or really working with. I brought up the jungle as an example, but business plays an important part. I've been involved in business for, like I said, over 20, 30 years in the business world. But at the same token, with the business world, the government is sort of a checks and balances. Just like our government and country is a checks and balances, we need to be able to look at not only businesses, how they can help the country, but also there's a challenge of them overextending themselves. It used to be the phrase, I think it was, what's good for General Motors is good for the country.
It's good for the country. That's right, yes. Not anymore.
Not anymore, not really. I think one of the greatest programs on television is like NPR and watching these different documentaries that they do. Just, I saw one the other day about the New York Central Railroad. And the fact that it was the Vanderbilts at the time who owned the New York Central, and how they would just plow through and do their thing and made the city of New York just very smelly and all these railroad tracks killing people. Didn't matter because they were running over, not that they wanted to run them over.
No, but no environmental protections.
No protection, exactly. And it wasn't until there was some regulation, outcry of certain things that happened, that the government was able to help come in and step in. And when I say government, it was really the people started to recognize, we can't let this go on like this. And so the government naturally at a point had to step in and help that out. So there is that role. I think there's a balance between what business and government, and they need to work in cooperation with each other. And that's why I think we need regulation. We need some regulations to help, because businesses may try to do too many things that aren't exactly what I'd call socially conscious, if you will.
Well, when I was growing up, there was a clear demarcation between the business class and the working class. And the business class was Republican and the working class was Democrat.
Right.
So that as I became a young woman, got married, moved to the suburbs, someone in my church was a stockbroker, and I just assumed he was a Republican, which he was, but how could he be a Catholic at the same time? Because that was another stereotype that I had been raised with, that Catholics aren't Republicans. So, and the same thing with ethnic groups. I mean, being a New Englander, there are various ethnicities that certain values get attached to. And, we were talking about democratic values, but it's great to hear you as a businessman talking about what you espouse, because I think some of those old stereotypes don't die. People still think that the business sector is out to get what it can, take what it can, and not care about those who are still struggling, trying to get into the workforce, trying to start a family. educate that family.
Yes, right. And family is an interesting word in terms of family values as well. I think some of our Republicans might say a family is a man and a woman, which is fine, sort of the nucleus. But again, when I look at the dignity of human beings, I mean, I know gay people as well who are together, raise children, and sort of like the bell curve. I mean, you can find people at both ends of the spectrum. You can find them in the middle. But I know a few people that I know who are gay. They have adopted children, and I couldn't think of anybody better from the people that I personally know. They're great parents. And that's something, again, from human dignity, we should recognize not just what the family is, but I had a quote here which I wanted to mention that I had seen, and it was about family values, about the term family values. For example, in an acceptance speech at the 2004 Democratic National Convention, John Kerry said, "It is time for those who talk about family values to start valuing families."
Exactly.
And I think that is so powerful. That was powerful to me when I heard that. Exactly, you know, there's all kinds of families that people should respect. And again, from a human dignity standpoint, it's people are, it's sort of like we all put our pants legs on one leg at a time. So why not respect the fact that people are different? And
well, the Democrats have always respected diversity.
Exactly,
there's no doubt about it.
Exactly. And that's, you know, when you say why am I a Democrat?
Well,
I mean,
you're a business person. How can you be a
how
Democrat?
Can I possibly? And I'm a Catholic, right?
Oh, there you go.
But it's a matter of just recognizing over my life that you know, I've always espoused these, but I've never really consciously thought about them in a certain way. But it's like this is, I'll say, partially how I was raised, partially by being married to my social worker wife. That you start to recognize some of these things even more and more. And
well, I think the senator's quote, too, when he talks about valuing families, is really the whole panoply of what we stand for. Protection of children,
right.
Education of children, a roof over somebody's head, food to put on the table, all those kinds of issues, which we started with, and I said the touchy-feely issues.
Right.
Democrats are in the forefront of trying to provide for keeping that family whole in some way.
That's right.
And allowing them to flourish as a family. Doesn't matter what their gender is.
Right.
Just keeping them happy and having a high quality of life is what we strive to provide. And the regulatory bodies that we support tend to keep that, I mean, consumer protection, FDA, et cetera.
Yeah, health care.
Well, the health care is like the elephant in the room that I talked to you about earlier. I mean, another judge has come out with a ruling striking down parts of the health reform law. But again, when you interview people, they really do want some kind of health care.
I think so. I relate quickly to a situation in my family, my extended family, meaning an uncle. They had a boy who was going to school and got hit over the head with a bag of books. Ooh. You know, one of his friends, they're playing around, hit him over the head. Basically, he became, you know, I'll say use the word vegetable, that's not the right word, but you know, he couldn't speak or talk or anything like that. And if it wasn't for the care that they were able to provide, meaning the money that they had either got from the government or whatever, I mean, they would have lost everything.
Right. And
it wasn't their fault. You know, it was an accident that happened, but these are the kinds of things that go on. And where government and social programs can help out people in need like this. So I think the whole debate about Obamacare, this story about death panels and all this, it's so ridiculous. I just don't know how they could even justify even using those kinds of terms. But it's health care is very important. Like I said, I was out of work for a year, and that could have been very devastating to us. I mean, we struggled by.
I'm sure you did.
And it was pretty tough. But and that's when I hear people saying, oh, they don't want to work or whatever, and I'm thinking, well, I don't know how many people are currently unemployed, but I'll tell you what, no doubt the vast majority want to get back to work and earn a decent living. but at least you got some basis to get covered by social your coverage that you have right now.
Well, unfortunately, today people are forced into working sometimes 2 jobs to make ends meet because the cost of living has become so high. I know when we bought our first house, it only cost us $20,000, and now you can buy not even a great car for $20,000.
Right.
So it used to be that you could save for that down payment on the house. Now you really need a little help from parents or other relatives to get the down payment to get into home ownership if that's what you want.
That's
but
for sure. Yeah.
everything is just so much more expensive these days that the 2 jobs becomes necessary. The woman working outside the home becomes necessary, which then down the roads you need daycare for the children. So it's a different world we're living in from what our parents lived in. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I can think of my parents. My dad had retired from his company, and fortunately, because of the pension system that they had then, that they contributed to and all that, he was able to retire. Today, it's much more difficult. I mean, this whole thing with IRAs and 401ks, well, there's some challenges.
Well, and companies pulling the pensions. There are no more pensions. Now, I mean, people will rant and rave about the state pension system or even the federal pension system, but in particular, the newspapers have carried the stories about the state pension system. The governor's trying to reform it.
Sure.
And I think we all agree. We don't want to see that kind of abuse. Democrats don't want to see that kind of abuse either.
Absolutely.
But we do want to see some kind of a safety net, to go back to your term, for people who are in their later years, and it's going to be later and later. I mean, people are working well beyond 70 these days in order to survive in this society.
Yeah. I think Social Security was started in Germany, I think, actually, and the part of the reason to that, I think, was Wilhelm I or somebody, but said that the age at that time, I think, was maybe in the 50s, and certainly it's been creeping up and creeping up as we see, and certainly the challenges you have in France with those kind of issues. But I think the government plays a role in people's lives. It's not there to be there in their bedroom or any kind of thing like that. It's a matter of the government is here. We're part of the government. We should help our own people throughout. And again, it's part of that value system that I believe in. I've seen, you mentioned education. Some of the things, again, with my wife in social services, seeing that generation after generation after generation just gets pulled down and can't get out of the trap that they're in. And it's a matter of education is so important.
It certainly is.
And we've got to recognize that.
We're getting the wrap-up signal here. I suppose we could just keep talking, but is there anything that we haven't touched on, any major democratic value that you wanted to... We kind of skipped around from education, housing, health care. I mean, they're all things that we want to see taken care of in our society.
Right. Well, I think what it is really developing a passion for things of this nature. And this is where I've gotten into. I think the Democratic side is very important, but we got to get more passionate about what we I think we have great beliefs, but we got to get passionate about them and really let people know how we feel.
That's the last word. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We hope to be with you again next month.